Ever get this feeling like, okay, blockchain, I know it's a big deal, but where do I even start?
Yeah, it could definitely feel like a bit of a rabbit hole.
Totally. So we're diving deep today, specifically into how this whole blockchain thing could totally shake up the world of digital advertising. We've got research, we've got insights, ready to break it down.
And hopefully cut through some of the hype along the way.
Absolutely, because let's be real, right now, digital advertising, it's a jungle out there.
It's true. You hear words like opaque, fragmented, even inefficient used to describe it, and not exactly inspiring confidence.
Not at all. So enter blockchain, potentially, possibly our knight in shining armor, offering a way out of this mess. Decentralized, transparent, secure, all those good things, right?
All right, picture this. Every single transaction, every impression, every click, it's all recorded on this public ledger that anyone can see. No more shady stuff going on behind the scenes.
Okay, I'm liking the sound of this, but with new tech, blockchain's not a magic wand, is it?
Definitely not.
Hmm.
To really get how it could change things, we need to use this framework called organizational activity theory. Sounds a little jargony, I know.
Lay it on me.
Basically, it helps us break down blockchain's impact on advertising into three parts: boundaries, context, and domains. Think of them like the building blocks of how advertising works now.
Okay, so boundaries, those are like the rules of the game.
Exactly. Blockchain could completely change how ads are bought, sold, delivered, the whole supply chain. Imagine total transparency. You'd know exactly who's involved at every step, where the money's going, less room for fraud.
Yeah, transparency would be a nice change. Okay, so what about context? Where do I fit into all of this as someone scrolling through websites?
Context is where it gets interesting for you as a user. It's about the relationship between you, content creators, and the advertisers. Imagine a world where you're actually rewarded for your attention, where you have more control over your own data.
Wait, rewind that. Rewarded, you mean like getting paid to watch an ad?
That's the idea. Blockchain could make micropayments directly to users a reality, compensation for your time and data. Plus, it empowers those creating the content, too, lets them get paid directly by their audience.
Okay, now that is a major shift. Instead of feeling like the product, I'm actually valued. I like it.
Exactly. And then there's a third area, domain.
Which is all about,
That's where we look at blockchain's potential to completely flip the script on the advertising platforms we have now. Could it create entirely new ones? We're talking a fundamental shift in how we even think about advertising.
so are we saying goodbye to the Googles and Facebooks of the world?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
It could level the playing field, but it's not a guaranteed win for the little guy. We'll dig into that a bit later.
Okay, so we got the lay of the land. Blockchain could change how advertising works, who it works for, even the whole playing field. But how likely is any of this to actually happen?
That's where it gets really interesting. To figure out where blockchain in advertising might be going, we looked at what the experts are saying.
Oh, so we're breaking out the crystal ball.
Not quite a crystal ball, but close. We dug into a Delphi study, which is where a bunch of experts get together and give their predictions about the future.
Okay, and what did these experts have to say about blockchain?
They analyzed 10 different ways blockchain could change the game, and some of their predictions were pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, so no more teasers. Give me the highlights. What got the experts most excited?
One of the predictions that scored really high, both in how likely it is to happen and how big of a deal it would be, was this whole idea of rewarding users for their attention.
We touched on this earlier, the whole getting paid to watch ads thing, and I gotta say, it definitely piqued my interest. But how would that actually work?
There are already platforms out there experimenting with this model. The Brave browser, for example, lets users opt in to see some privacy-respecting ads, and in return, they get cryptocurrency tokens.
So it's like instead of just bombarding me with whatever ads, they actually have to offer something valuable for my time.
Exactly. It completely changes the power dynamic.
Yeah.
Users aren't just passive consumers anymore. They have a seat at the table.
And what about the people making the content, the creators? How does this impact them?
That's another really exciting aspect. With blockchain, content creators could bypass the traditional platforms and monetize their work directly. Imagine writers, artists, musicians getting paid directly by their fans, no middleman taking a cut.
Now that would be a game changer, especially for independent creators. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about another big concern for people online. Data privacy. Can blockchain offer any solutions there?
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of experts think data security is one of the areas where blockchain could have the biggest impact.
Because every transaction is trackable and transparent.
Exactly. With blockchain, you could potentially have this digital ID that gives you complete control over your data. You decide what information you share, who you share it with, and you can see exactly how it's being used.
So no more shadowy data brokers buying and selling my info without me even knowing.
Potentially not. It could even lead to something called zero-knowledge advertising.
Okay, now that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Zero knowledge advertising. Tell me more.
Essentially, it means that advertisers could target ads based on your interests without actually knowing any of your personal information.
Okay, I'm going to need an example on this one. How does that even work?
Imagine a system where you could prove you're interested in, let's say, sustainable living without revealing your browsing history or any personal details. Advertisers could then target you with ads that are relevant to you without ever having access to your private data.
That almost sounds too good to be true. Is that even technologically possible?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
The technology is definitely evolving quickly, but there are some hurdles to overcome. Privacy regulations, scalability, getting enough people to actually use it. Those are just a few of the challenges.
It sounds like a complicated landscape to navigate, but the potential benefits are huge. What about those boundary issues we were talking about before, how blockchain could clean up the ad supply chain? Did the experts have any thoughts on that?
Actually, that was one area where the experts were a bit more cautious. While they acknowledged that blockchain could lead to a system that's more transparent and efficient, they also pointed out some pretty big obstacles.
Such as?
Well, for one thing, the world of digital advertising is incredibly complex. You've got all these different players, all these different platforms and technologies. Getting everyone to agree on a blockchain-based solution would be incredibly difficult.
So, even though blockchain could theoretically make things crystal clear, the reality is a bit messier.
Exactly. Plus, there's the issue of power, right? The companies that are already dominating the digital advertising world, they have a lot to gain from keeping things the way they are.
Because if we can track everything, that means less opportunity for fraud, which could mean less revenue for them, right?
You got it. The experts were especially skeptical about whether blockchain could really shake up the dominance of search engine advertising.
So those ads at the top of my Google searches aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Maybe, maybe not. While blockchain might not completely disrupt the industry overnight, it does have the power to empower new players, create alternative models that could challenge the status quo.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from how blockchain could change the nuts and bolts of advertising to, maybe even turning the whole industry on its head. It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
Definitely. We've painted a picture of a pretty different future for digital advertising, one with more transparency, users having more of a say, and maybe even a more level playing field when it comes to who's got the power and who's making the money.
But we've also talked about some of the challenges, right? The skepticism around blockchain, the fact that this isn't going to be some overnight revolution.
Absolutely. Remember those experts we mentioned earlier, the ones from that Delphi study? One of the big themes that kept coming up was this idea of trust, or rather, the lack of trust in how digital advertising works right now.
And that's where blockchain comes in, potentially rebuilding that trust.
Exactly. It's not about blindly trusting technology. It's about creating a system that's inherently more trustworthy. Because everything's out in the open. You can track it, you can audit it, it's secure.
So less opportunity for shady stuff to go unnoticed.
Right. And that's good for everyone involved. Advertisers can be more confident that their ads are actually reaching real people. Publishers can get a fair price for their ad space. And users like you and me, we get more control over our data and our online experience in general.
It all sounds good, at least in theory. But I'm still stuck on this whole power dynamic thing. These big companies, they've built empires on how advertising works now. Why would they want to change things?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something the experts were wrestling with, too. Some are optimistic that blockchain could really give smaller players a chance, level the playing field, but others weren't so sure.
Because, well, the bigger you are, the less likely you are to want to change, right?
Exactly. And we can't forget, for all its potential, blockchain is still pretty new. There are technical challenges, regulations are still being figured out, and then there's getting everyone to actually use it. That's a big one.
So it's not just about whether blockchain can change digital advertising, but whether it actually will.
That's the big question. And that's what makes this whole area so fascinating. We're talking about a future with lots of different possibilities.
So where does that leave us, the people trying to navigate this increasingly complex digital world?
I think it comes down to informed skepticism. We need to understand both the potential of blockchain and its limitations, and be thoughtful about how we engage with it. Don't buy into the hype, but don't dismiss the possibilities either.
Ask questions, demand transparency, be aware of what's happening with our data.
Exactly. And have these conversations. Think about the what-ifs and help shape the future of digital advertising into something that works for everyone, not just a select few.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. But that's what we're here for, to dive deep into these complex topics. So next time you're online and you see an ad, maybe take a second to think about everything going on behind the scenes. Think about the data, the companies involved, and the potential for things to be different, more transparent, more equitable. It's up to all of us to shape that future.
Well said. It's a future worth fighting for.